Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGPrime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FoulLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FoulLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer patrons Shukong Fu, Vite Ramen, and Maxime Van He. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers. DMO73 here, bringing you some Wanderer feature match goodness between Paul playing Ice Shackles Olivia versus Jose playing Wanderer Violet. Not as crazy as Kyron Lucas's 49 card Violet, but it is one of the locals at Paul's up CCG Prime, where he's playing Wanderer, and so we're jumping in. Before we get started, though, I do want to give you a reminder that right now Odyssey Games does have pre-orders up for Game of Gods Revolution. You can check that out in the link in the description. Get those boxes pre-ordered. So we're jumping in here. Paul not having a turn 1 play, unfortunately not seeing that Shackles of Ice early on. It is definitely what he wants to see, to be able to turn on Violet as much as possible. We do see a blue-green stone come down from Jose, discarding a white garden to gain 1,000 life, and at which point we're going to see Paul fumbling with a phone to try to get his life total tracker on screen, while also talking to me in his feature match recording. But yeah, so while Paul's dealing with that, let's go ahead and talk about the fact that Odyssey currently has boxes available for pre-order of Game of Gods Revolution. If you're checking out our spoiler videos every week, you know that we are pretty excited about Typhon, Zeus, Athenia, and Dragonflame. So you can check those out, get those boxes pre-ordered. They do not have pre-release kits available for pre-order this time. They're sticking with boxes this time around, primarily due to the shift in how pre-release boxes are being formatted. And so this is a good way to make sure that you know what you're getting as you get into it. But go ahead and get those boxes so that you're ready to go when the set drops. Now, with that out of the way, Paul's going to pay 2 with this Moonshade here to go ahead and cast Priscia's Big Show. Olivia is one of the rulers that is definitely going to make use of Priscia a lot. Just being able to focus up and control what those top decks are, as well as just having this really awesome toolbox out of the deck. She has a lot of good 2-drops, 1-drops, and 3-drops to give her a lot of flexibility based on what is on the field. And we've seen her before with that kind of like 1-2 punch where you counter and response with some pressure and just grind your opponent out. Going into turn 2 here, see a deep wood stone on the side of Paul, and then I pass. We are going to see a burned coin for Jose to do Violet, which is a little bit interesting, but in response we are going to see that Lowrite come down and say, no, you've burned your coin, that's down for a resource, no Violet activation for you. Call stone, another deep blue, hopefully trying to see that heart-to-heart talk. Nope, still nothing there. We're going to go ahead and use Violet to dig. Discarding a Magical Loveliness to tap down the Lowrite and then burn Paul for 400, taking him down to 34. See, pretty full grip of cards there. Looks like a couple of improved healing robots. Seeing that Priscia, Paul hurting himself, going down to 32 to do another peek at the top 2. Up to a 2-drop for Priscia, which is a lot of Olivia's good stuff. This is suddenly equals Sparklefish. This suddenly equals lots of good stuff. As we move into combat here, Jose's going to go ahead and use Violet again. We're going to see another Lowrite to stop it, say, no, I'm not going to stop you from chipping you in for 100 damage. Finally getting some damage in there, going down to 549. I don't really know if this was the best call to use a Lowrite just to be able to get 100 damage, but it does stop the dig, and it does seem like Jose's hand, at least right now, is pretty suboptimal. So stopping him from doing the digging with Violet does seem potentially worth it. Now we see Paul going for the actual Priscia here in response to the Violet, just saying, no, I'm not going to let you do any of these Violet activations, which I think is incorrect. It does, though, however, look like Jose does not have an Atomic Turbulence in that hand. So we do see a Prisia, go grab a Lorite to stop that Violet activation again, keeping that graveyard very, very minimally filled. We do see an Atomic Reactor come down to go get whatever kind of atom he wants here. I imagine we'll see a Dark Prominence. Yeah, Dark Prominence makes a lot of sense. Eventually, you know, even without an Atomic Turbulence, eventually Violet can just get enough to the grave. So I think that's kind of what Jose's strategy is here right now. Just to say, you know, hey, let's go ahead and keep ourselves at a position where I'm going to be able to keep the damage from you to a minimum and slowly get my atoms to the grave. Because at this point in time, Paul's probably out of Lorites. And Lorites don't represent a ton of damage here. And even though we just went to 1 Prisia, you know, that could be easily killed with a Dark Prominence, and then we're just dealing 3 damage a turn. See a Kaguya Stone of Sorrow. Paul is doing the work for him a little bit, taking him down to 27 to be able to look at the top 2 cards. As he moves into combat, we're going to see another Violet activation. Dark Prom choosing to kill one of the Lorites, which I think is a little bit of a misplay. Stopping ourselves from taking as much damage as possible. Do you see a Brave Force? Finally seeing a second red source, so we're certainly at a position where we might see a Violet Flip suddenly becomes live. You know, when you have all these atoms in your hand. A Violet Flip maybe next turn could be very, very good, especially if he's playing something like Eternal Wind. We see a attempted Violet activation. In comes a Dolly Godside in response, bounces the Lorite back to hand, and then we see a Lorite cast to just continuously tell Jose that he does not get to use Violet's activation. In a deck that is shackling, you know, because of Ice Shackles in the main, it's certainly doing a good job without the Ice Shackles of keeping Jose's Violet under wraps. And then we see a Violet and Maribella come down. Paul forgetting to shuffle after doing his dolly, and then moving into his turn. We're at a position now where that Violet is a little bit of a problem, but also at the same time, Jose's stone lineup right now is pretty suboptimal to make the best use out of that. We do see the Violet coming down here as we move into the main phase for Paul. Finally getting to see that Atomic Bahamut. I could see us pitching a White Garden, looks like, or just a Brave Force just to get it out of hand. But we are going to ditch another Dark Prominence, finally getting rid of that Prisia. So right now we have 3 different atoms in grave. We have 2 Dark Prominence, a Magical Loveliness, and a White Garden. So we're at 3. But also at the same time, you don't have to remove 5. You can just remove you know, fewer than that. And so we're certainly at a point where we have red will to be able to play Atomic Bahamut and have him have all his enter effects. It's just a matter of, can we protect it against a deck that has a lot of cancels? Without Turbulence, it's going to be hard to resolve this card. That's one of the reasons why I think that going for the Violet Flip might be better. Because you can put in a lot more pressure, especially since Paul has done some of the work for you. And there's probably less in his deck that can kill Violet than can kill a Resonator, especially if he's sitting on cancels. Unless he's playing Surging Lightning. Down comes a Terra Thunderfish, a card that we have not seen in a while. We're going to use this to probably tap down all of his entities. And so then he gets to go in for the aggression here. So 1,000, and then 1, and then 1, and then 4. So 1,600 damage. Takes him out to 24. So still on a 2-turn clock, which is a little bit of a concern, but we do leave open a little bit of will to be able to interact. The question becomes, do we have enough to interact to get through potentially, you know, a lot of will. It does look like there might be 2 Atomic Bahamut's in hand at this point, which is a little crazy. So we do Violet effect here. We're going to discard. Looks like we're going to discard another White Garden, go back up to 34. Just casting an Eternal Wind to then recover a stone. Once again, we are at this point, we are in time at 4 atoms now, but we can banish, produce red and banish the Stone of Atoms to make 5. Down comes the Atomic Bahamut, number 1. For 5 unique atoms removed, we can use the floating 1. There's the Atomic Bahamut. Paul snap slams the Sparklefish, hurting himself to cancel it, saying, haha, I've got it. I've got that prepared. However, it taps him out, and we see the 1-2 punch of Improved Healing Robot, putting them all back into the graveyard, and then just casting the second one. So that is the lethal there, not shackling nearly enough to prevent double Atomic Bahamut from coming down on turn 5. Going into game 2 here, Paul taking the coin, I imagine, which does set him up nicely for potentially being able to do Dolly into Olivia, Dolly into can't do Dolly into Sparklefish because we don't have green energized, but Dolly into Viola is also really nice, especially if we see Jose try to go for the turn 1 heart-to-heart talk, which is exactly what we see him try to do. So heart-to-heart talk comes down here. In response, we're going to see God's Art of Olivia to go get Dolly, which is going to produce him a blue, and then we use coin plus the blue from Dolly to cast Viola and put the heart-to-heart talk back on the bottom of his deck. This is a pretty strong start. It puts 9 damage pressure on board on technically turn 0 for Paul, so he can start going in. And it leaves Jose completely vulnerable. He doesn't get the option to be able to use the God's Art of, or any of the actions of Violet now. And we do see that turn 1 Shackles. So this is a really strong start for Paul here. He gets to start going in for pressure, gets to swing in for 9 damage. Shackles of Ice now locks Jose out of being able to use Violet unless he can just hard cast an Aegis. And what we saw from that stone base in game 1 doesn't really necessarily look like he has a way to cast Aegis effectively. He'd be pretty much at the mercy of his stones. And that significantly decreases the speed of Violet. We do see that heart-to-heart talk come down. At this point in time, it's just a draw power because it's not going to be able to do anything. It also can be used as a piece to go get a 1-drop addition, so maybe a tiny Violet. We see a Gradius come down just to go ahead and get an atom into the grave and kill the Viola, which makes a lot of sense. So Paul's at a pretty good point here to be able to start chipping through. We see he has the aggression of Terra Thunderfish. Another card I did not expect to see, Percival, the Charmed Knight. This is the one that gets you, you get to look at any number, or the top 5 cards and pick a chant with total cost 2 or less, which is actually really nice. Also can give some 4C elements and put another body on board. This leaves Paul with the ability to just go in for 4, leave up a blocker and a stone, and then pass the turn. Blue green stone, so still no way to get to that Aegis right now. We're going to go ahead and proactively crack that Atom Stone, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. You see he has that Aegis in hand. There's just not necessarily a reason, I think, right now to proactively lose a will, like go down a stone, especially since he were going first. Does see a magical loveliness there to tap down the Percival, which I think was just so that we didn't waste the red will. It does get another Atom engrave, so at this point in time we're at 3. Paul being able to grab that 3rd stone, swings in for a total of 6 damage there, and then can just leave open will. Do see a pass. Eternal Wind there gets us to 4 atoms. So we're at a point where even despite having the Shackles of Ice, and there is the Aegis, so that could actually get us to 6 atoms. Gradius, Eternal Wind, or get us to 5. So down comes the Aegis to try to pop the Shackles, and honestly the Fiola there to stop it is pretty huge because it keeps the atom out of the grave. So we are still at only 4 atoms in the graveyard, which is pretty huge. If we had been able to resolve that Aegis plus the Eternal Wind, we would have actually had the will to be at 5 atoms in grave, plus 5 unique atoms in grave, plus 1 recovered stone for a Bahamut. Paul thinking about whether or not we're trying to go for a Terra Thunderfish here. He says, what's the lines that I'm necessarily concerned about here? Unfortunately, Jose's hand is not looking great. Looks like we have a Brave Force, a couple of more Eternal Winds, and then a spell, the 6th Spoon, Tachyon. We do see that Terra Thunderfish come back down, and it is going to be an all-out slugfest here. So that's 1,000. Forces him to tap down all of his stuff. He could also just buff his own things if he was particularly concerned about it, which I think would have been the smarter play. And then he can go in for exactly lethal. From all of that stuff on board, it is exactly 2100 damage, and he takes the game as we go into game 3. So Paul doing a pretty good job there of maintaining the early pressure thanks to the Ice Shackles. He's at a little bit of an... it's not necessarily bad to play the turn 1 Shackles when you're going second, mainly because there will never be a moment where Jose would be able to use Violet to kill the Shackles using the coin. So there is something to be said about, I'm going to play Shackles right now on turn 1 to say, in response, use your Violet and get like no value off of it, or just lose your activation. Ultimately, though, we do see the turn 1 Shackles, and Jose does decide to just say, you know what, that's fine, I'll keep the 1 will for something else later. Which I don't hate as a play, especially when your first stone is a water stone, and you want to be able to play Bahamut later. It does mean that you also have to get less atoms in graveyard to try to get to that, but ultimately we do see a coin popped to play Atomic Reactor. Gets to search. He has no hand size, maximum hand size limit while it's on. We're going to go grab that Aegis, and we do see a Atomic no hand size while he is on the field. One thing to keep in mind is that Shackles of Ice does actually stop Paul from playing his own God's Art, so I think there actually would have been a better choice to leave your stone up to play, use God's Art to grab Dolly to then produce blue to then play the Shackles, so that you're not locked out. There's going to be very few opportunities to use that God's Art now that Shackles is on the field, let alone, benefit to having the God's Art after the Shackles. Like, if Jose is successfully entering the Shackles of Ice, you're probably out of luck anyway. We do see a Callstone pass hitting a deep blue Hearth's Core stone for Jose. And at the end of the turn, we do see that Prisia Big Show coming online to be able to start the consistency piece. And then we do see a pass there. Atomic Magic Stone of the Atoms, which gets us to another, we're up to 2 atoms here. We do get a red and draw a card. We don't have white though, again, so I'm not entirely sure if there was a justification for using the stone in that moment. We do see an Atomic Turbulence. This will certainly help to get a bunch of atoms to grave, and it does look like there is double Atomic Bahamut. Pitching 3, so we are now at 5 uniques very clearly with and we do have a floating red available. We are going to see a Sparklefish come down here to stop the we start to see a Sparklefish. Oh, he changes his mind. Going to see a Fiola. This makes a lot more sense to use the Fiola versus this, because if there is a Atomic Bahamut coming down here this turn, Sparklefish can stop it. And Fiola could not. We do have that floating red available, ultimately choosing to not spend it, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. Maybe forgetting we had it. If we had the ability to play the Atomic Bahamut there, if we had thought about it, I actually think we do lethal there, because we only have one blue will available for Paul, and there's nothing in that environment outside of potentially a Surging Lightning that can kill the Atomic Bahamut. Do you swing in with the Fiola? Then we just see a pass. Brave Force, very helpful for that Bahamut that's in hand. Problem is we don't have too much follow-up to if there is indeed, and we know, the problem is now we know there's a Sparklefish, right? That's the biggest piece, is that Paul kind of showed his hand, but also kind of shows the hand to Jose in a way that kind of doesn't make sense to go for this play line. So we're going for the Atomic Bahamut. Down comes the Sparklefish. Just gonna hard cancel it. We don't have any more atoms to be able to play the second one. Jose's messing with Paul, saying, what if I had it again? Which is fine for Paul, because he would have had the will to be able to get a second one anyway. Second cancel out of the way potentially. Would have had to have been a hard cancel, though, because we have used our one random for the turn off of Sparklefish. Goes to Big Show again. Let's see, let's look at what those top two cards are. Up to 2. Up to 5 stones here, which is a great place to be. And down looks like gonna come... potentially come in another Terra Thunderfish. The Prisia being at 2 here is great, because it also means that Prisia is a Sparklefish, which is pretty huge. Down comes the Terra Thunderfish. Do we have a response from Jose? Probably not, especially since right now only will that's available is blue-red. Gonna force him to tap all of his stuff down instead of giving his stuff a buff, which I think is incorrect, because he can just float the will in response. Just get to swing in for a grand total of 2200 damage, so putting Jose immediately on the clock. He does go to God's Art here, and then he catches that he can't have done that. So just as a reminder, Shackles of Ice does inflict correct both players. Neither player can activate the activate abilities of rulers they control while Shackles is unbestowed. Now what he could have done is, if he really needed that, is he could have, the weird play line is to bestow Shackles to one of his dudes, God's Art, have Dolly bounce the Shackles back to his hand, and then recast the Shackles. It's a bad play and you shouldn't do it, because it keeps you off of 2 will during the Jose's turn when he might have another Atomic Bahamut, but it is an option. Now, Paul also makes a very silly play here. We see the improved Burning Robot come down, and Paul lowrights the enter effect to put any number of atoms from your graveyard into your hand, and there aren't any atoms in Jose's graveyard, so that effect didn't do anything. He should have instead waited until Jose attacked with it, lowrighted the give it +1/+1 counters after, and then blocked. At this point in time, though, with Terra Thunderfish, we do have game. We can just swing in with everything that's on board. Paul, for good measure and for no reason, plays a second Shackles of Ice. Down in comes Terra Thunderfish, forcing him to tap down all of his entities, and then he can swing in with the rest for lethal. So that is going to be the game. Thank you guys so much. We will have the deck profile for the Ice Shackles Olivia up later this week, hopefully. And again, be sure to check out Odyssey Games to get those pre-orders in for Game of Gods Revolution. Very excited about the third set and closeout of Dual Cluster. But until next time, thank you guys so much for watching, and this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.